اللهم صل على الحبيب محمد يا ربي صل.
I think it's more. I don't expect people to have some profound knowledge of hadith. I mean, I think the bigger problem is that they need to know kind of just general rules about how to like kind of filter things they hear. You don't need to know all these hadiths, but you need to know how to deal with hadiths. You don't, because a lot of times I think Muslims just end up getting a lot of anxiety over them when they shouldn't necessarily have that.
But the reality is, when you go to Facebook, Twitter, if I turn on Fox News, we have people quoting very specific hadith from Bukhari that are saying your messenger said this.
It's really, I mean, it's tough because you got, I mean, I'm stunned by the level, I mean, of research that like Islamophobes do. I mean, they come with stuff that you can't, first of all, you have lots of hadiths that are totally unreliable, and Muslims are being held accountable for that. Then you have stuff in the Sirah, which is totally unreliable. They're being held accountable for that. Then you have just even the reliable transmissions. It's so hard to like have ways to explain and understand all these things. And you're constantly, I mean, it's like a constant bombardment. That's the worst. If it was just one or two things a year or something, I mean, this is just, it's like rainfall on you all the time. And, that's why I spend a lot of my time just trying to give Muslims at the very least, for example, they don't have to, just like a basic defense, which is if someone just comes and tells you something, you don't have to believe them unless they can provide evidence for that, And even if they can give you evidence for that, you don't have to, it might just be not a true story, right? Or it might, be out of context, or it might be, so it's to get Muslims like stop feeling that they're constantly having to, that their religion is constantly riding on accusations that are made against them.
But after a while, don't those accusations like wear someone down? I'm a college kid. I'm 20-something years old. Like you said, one accusation, okay, 2, 3, 500. At one point you're like, it gets lodged somewhere. What do we do with that? And if we can't expect them to be scholars, and be able to respond to this stuff, how do they handle it?
It is, so the challenge in here, Allah Alam, is that our scholarship has to change the ways, the modes of dealing with issues. We cannot keep on importing all of the issues that we inherited and think that they're going to make sense to the issues of today. So we have to sharpen our language. We have to sharpen our argument. We have to, as I said, open up the windows of our tradition to acquire conceptual modes of thinking that allow us to counter all of that. To give you an example, So, as I said, yes, people are bombarded with all of this, but we need to equip them. So, it's an example. We in the 90s have this movement that happened in India. It's called the subaltern studies. And the subaltern studies, what they did, they thought that the universalizing the modes of thinking of European tradition, right? The tradition of thinking about history that emerged in Europe is making everybody think the same way. They're universalizing those modes of thinking, and in that way, there is a hegemony of liberal modes of thinking. So to give an example, so when you take the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, this hadith for example, and you want to understand them with the sensitivities of today, what are you doing? So are the sensitivities of today universal? They're not. These are the sensitivity of today related to the age of marriage, for example, are modern things. These are the construct of our society right now. These are the construct of modern, Western, secularist society that lived the experience of the human rights, lived the experience of the World War I and World War II, the Enlightenment, and all of this are produced modes of thinking that are so local. But because of the hegemony of modernity, they become universalized. So now we have to read our history through them. You understand what I mean? So now my sensitivities are, I have to make them align with the sensitivities of a European. I don't.
Yeah, I
You
mean, that's
understand what I
one,
mean? So that's one thing.
one of the things is, I mean, that's why I spent a lot of my time with trying to convey to people that it's the better defense is not necessarily to teach them everything about the Islamic tradition, but just to teach them, because the idea is that here's the thing from the Islamic tradition, and we're comparing it to the way things really should be, right? And what does that mean? That's basically modern, urban, Western values. It's not even Western values. I mean, there's lots of people in this country who don't share liberal, urban American values. So it's a very specific subset within a culture that has become the kind of litmus test for everybody else being righteous or not, or rightly guided or not. And so to do exactly what Imam Hassan said, which is to show people that you don't, the best reaction isn't necessarily to explain your tradition. It's just to remind other people that what they think is right or wrong is just a very specific notion. So they think eating dog meat is disgusting. Other people in the world think eating dog meat is fine. Other people, for most of human history and most places in the world today, people don't have a problem marrying women who are really young. It's not, I mean, it might freak people out. People might say, oh, how can Jonathan Brown say that on video? But it's just a fact. It's a simple fact. And these people who today and 100 years ago and 200 years ago, they're just as human as us. They're just as smart as us. They're not monsters. They're not immoral, right? The people can't, especially it's interesting, Americans, Western Europeans, they have a very hard time accepting that people can have really different moral visions. And that's something that is actually important for Muslims to know to defend their own faith, but it's also a contribution we can make to a society like the United States. People in the United States have to be more flexible they can't think that everybody in the world is going to agree with them inside this country. I mean, one of the reasons we have such polarized politics in this country is people can't accept that there are other people who think really differently about important issues, who live amongst us, and they can't deal with interacting with them. They can't deal with this difference of opinion.
It's also a very the important work that we all have to do as students of ilm and for our mashayikh and so. We have to look our tradition looking critically at our tradition is not a bad thing. Is not a bad thing. It's actually one of the ways of perpetuating our tradition is to open it up to criticism, because if it's not, then we are talking to ourselves and we're never going to make it relevant to the next generations. And there is one thing that's Dr. Jackson has said that really resonates with me. The demise of a tradition that never happened because of persecution, or rarely happened in history because of a persecution, rarely. What really the danger for us and for our tradition at this time is the apathy that is born out of irrelevance. So when you're irrelevant, you're not convincing even the people around you. And unless we look at our tradition critically, we're not going to be doing that. To give you an example, we have to look at concept that made us who we are. The concept of khilafah that we talked about today, for example, we have to look at that critically. We have to look at the issue of slavery that is all over all over the books of fiqh. The issue of so a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, for example, that I don't believe that Sayyidah Aisha married at 9. I don't believe that. I'm not saying that because I have some liberal sensitivities and I will appease them. No, because even within the tradition, there were opinions that said different ways. So that became, for whatever reason, became the orthodox view. So we have to start thinking of, so there survived within this quote-unquote orthodox view, there survived a lot of other opinions that were very valid at the time of the tabi'in and tabi'in are really valid. But they were not adopted, but still in the books, right? So we have to start thinking, we have to start looking at our tradition that doesn't mean that we have to throw every single thing. No, it is our responsibility to hand on the torch to the next generation in the most beautiful way. And there is no tradition that you can put in a bottle and put a crock on it and put it in a time capsule. It can never do that, right? So we have to open it up in a way. It's like here it is, and if we struggle with things, That's how theology is born. That the best theology comes when we struggle explaining things, and we should not be afraid of that. We should not be afraid of that. We should not be the people who have answers for every single thing. It's just